I didn't even arrive at Northland with even the foggiest idea that God would ever call me into full-time ministry. I did grow up as a missionary kid, and I did have a relationship with Jesus Christ, but honestly, I had never had any desire to serve God myself. Ministry had never been personal to me, and so as a result, the plans that I had for my life were very much my own plans. They were very selfish. So during my first semester at Northland, as I was immersed in the daily culture of campus life, I began to grow in my faith, and I began to grow in my journey towards Christ-likeness. And as I was involved in the extension ministries that Northland provided, I began to serve God. And I began to serve Him even outside of the required events. And really, Trevor, I believe that I am where I am today, and that God is able to use me in the capacity that He does today as a direct result of those baby steps that I took during my time at Northland. Basically just removing myself from the center of my life and being willing to serve God in whatever way that He wanted. As I was willing to serve God in the smaller things that He sent my way, He began to bring bigger and bigger things across my path that I could serve Him in, until the day that I even realized that even that was too small, and God wanted me to serve Him by giving Him my whole life, to do with it whatever He wanted, with no strings attached. I found that I love serving Him, and maybe not every minuscule aspect of every service opportunity, but the fact that I was doing it for God. It wasn't a drudgery. It was something I wanted to do. And through that, I began to experience God's joy and His fulfillment for really one of the first times in my life. And that was the beginning for me in a shift in my thinking. Because up until then, I still had a bit of that mentality that figured that God was probably going to be having you do things that you didn't entirely want to do. And this was even to the extent that the night that I surrendered complete control of my life over to God, I knew it was what He wanted for me, and I was willing to submit to His will for my life. But there was still this little panic in the back of my mind that was afraid that if I gave control of my life over to God, He was going to have me do something I didn't want to do. For example, what I struggled with at the time was that God would want me to stay in the States and be a pastor or something like that. And I just couldn't think of anything more laborious than that. But what I didn't realize at the time was that God was the one who had been changing my heart. He is the one that had been slowly aligning my desires with His will for my life. And as I served Him, and as I studied His Word, and as I grew in Christ-likeness, the things that I found joy in doing for God were the joys that God Himself was placing in me. And it was God who had slowly been giving me a desire to serve Him as a foreign missionary in one of the neediest places in the world. That wasn't my own idea. What normal person would come up with that on their own? And yet I couldn't think of anything that I wanted more than to serve God with my life in what many consider to be a hardship post, and the place where we live now is that hardship post, and it's where we've happily served for years. And it has been hard at times. It's been really hard, a lot of times. Ministry isn't for the faint of heart, and especially not on the continent of Africa. And ultimately, if it wasn't for the fact that God wanted us right where we are right now, we wouldn't have been able to make it this long on our own strength. And through it all, God has always been faithful to us. We can always look back and we can see the hand of God at work in the good times and in the bad times. I believe with all my heart that God is the one who is building His church, and I believe experientially that God takes care of His workers. Well, during my time at Northland, we were learning about ministry opportunities around the world and needs around the world, and I had befriended some MKs from the Bell family who had grown up in Congo. It was actually Zaire at the time, and it was through them that I specifically learned of the incredible needs that there were in Congo. I also learned about the political unrest that there was there, and how many missionaries had to leave throughout the different points in history in that country, and learned that it wasn't really a missionary hotspot or a missionary destination in the world anymore, even though there were so many critical opportunities for ministry there. The sad truth was that new missionaries starting out were not going to Congo anymore, and many of the missionaries who were there were spread thin and were closing in on retirement age or beyond. And I began to realize that through my upbringing and through my personality that God had given me, and the gifts and the talents and the abilities that God had given me, that He had uniquely prepared me as well suited and able to serve Him in a country like Congo, a country that is a hardship post and where many people would recoil at the thought of even visiting, and yet today we call Congo our home. And that's only by the grace of God. Well, I believe that God's calling has to do with my pastoral ministry, not necessarily the place that we are right now. So in a nutshell, God has given me the heart and the gifts of a pastor, and then secondly, He has uniquely prepared our family for service in Congo during this time, and obviously according to His master plan. For us, discipleship is everything, but we believe it needs to start in and through the local church context, because it's the church that bears God's authority for the propagation of the gospel. And the time that we've spent in Lubumbashi, either our past term or this term, has been focused completely towards laying the groundwork for a solid local church in town, and also building a framework for long-term ministry here as well. And we envision all aspects of our discipleship involvement as always flowing out of this local church context. So what's that look like? Basically, you see discipleship happening within the local church as part of just normal body life. So that's one-on-one interactions. Those are strategic times with people, group teaching slots, the formal side of ministry, but also just living our Christian lives together. Inviting our unsaved friends into our homes, into our lives, as we share with them the truth about the hope that lies within us as followers of Jesus Christ. So that's the micro local church side of discipleship. But now we're also in a macro position to relevantly affect other sister churches in town. And our desire in that is to see the development of a grassroots leadership training program, one that is demographically relevant, one that is realistically reproducible within our culture here in this country, for the training of future leaders here. I strongly believe that it is future Congolese church leaders who need to be the ones to pioneer a viable church planting movement in this country. Realistically, it's not going to be a future army of foreign missionaries who have yet to show up anyway. Okay? We've got to have a training strategy that is equal to the task at hand, and it needs to be vernacular. It needs to be reproducible on a grassroots level. So right now, we're in a place where we're seeking wisdom, and we're seeking partnership. We're seeking the involvement of others whom God has uniquely prepared for such a time as this, according to His master plan. Well, the main thing I would want to impart to someone who may be asking questions about God's calling on their life, or to someone who may just be starting out on their journey towards full-time vocational ministry, is that if God is working in your life right now, then serve Him right now, however you can. And serve Him first and foremost in and through your local church. The church is the entity that God has put into place as the authority and the vetting agent, if you will, for God's workers. And it's through the church that God's master plan is unfolding around us today. So my advice is this: serve God and let Him give you even bigger service opportunities as He makes His plan for your life clearer over time. And submit to the scrutiny and the encouragement of your local church as they verify God's gifts and His calling in your life.